Chapter 1. They say the hardest part of losing your husband is learning how to live without him, but for me, the real shock came days later, when my own children tried to remove me from my life, my home and my future, all in the name of love. My name is Margaret. I am 56 years old, and I buried my husband on a quiet winter morning, only to discover that the people I trusted most had already planned what would happen to me next. By the time I realized I was being managed, not protected, I was sitting in the back seat of my own car, watching familiar roads disappear, unaware that I was about to be left on the side of the road with nothing but a suitcase, a purse, and the one thing they never thought to take from me. The first thing I noticed at my husband's funeral was how efficiently grief can be managed when people have somewhere else they would rather be. The church in Maple Hollow was the same white clapboard building where Grant and I had sat in the third pew for decades, our coats still damp from the snow outside, our hands always finding each other in the quiet. That morning the pews were full, the air smelled like wool and lilies, and everything looked exactly as it should. Neat, respectable, controlled. I sat in the front row with a folded program on my lap and the weight of a life I did not know how to carry alone. My fingers kept tracing the edge of the paper until it softened and curled. I told myself to breathe in through my nose and out through my mouth the way the hospice nurse had coached me when Grant's pain broke through the medication. It worked then. It did not work now. When the pastor said Grant's name, my chest tightened like someone had cinched a belt around my ribs. People shifted behind me, clearing throats, sniffing. A woman I barely knew touched my shoulder and whispered that Grant was in a better place. I nodded, because that is what you do when your world has just ended and everyone else needs you to be polite about it. Ethan arrived right on time. My son is the kind of man who is always on time, always a little too put together. He wore a charcoal suit that looked like it had never seen a lint brush because it never needed one. His hair was trimmed close at the sides, his jaw set his eyes dry. He leaned down to kiss my cheek, and his cologne cut through the church air like a clean blade. "Mom," he said softly, like we were in a library. Paige slipped in behind him, her boots tapping once before she realized the sound and stopped. She looked beautiful in a black coat that fit like it had been tailored on purpose. A pearl stud in each ear, a fresh blowout. She hugged me tight enough to look convincing, then pulled back to check my face the way you check a mirror for smudges. "I am so sorry," she said, and her voice did not crack. I waited for the moment when the sight of her father's casket would break something open in her, or in Ethan. I waited for a tremor, a breath caught in the throat, a sob that would confirm this loss belonged to all of us. What I got was composure, the kind you practice. During the service, Ethan kept his hands folded, his gaze forward. Paige sat with her shoulders squared, blinking slowly, careful not to let mascara betray her. When people came up afterward offering condolences and casseroles and stories about Grant fixing a fence or bringing apples to the school fundraiser, Ethan thanked them like he was shaking hands at a networking event. Paige smiled and nodded, saying that meant so much over and over the same tone each time. I stood between them like a display the widow at center and felt myself disappearing into the role. Outside, snow fell in soft flakes that made everything quieter. The hearse idled near the curb. Cars lined the road like a procession that knew exactly where to go. Someone had arranged the flowers at the gravesite, white and pale pink against the dark earth. I watched the casket lower, and the world tilted just enough that I had to grip Ethan's arm to stay upright. He steadied me immediately. Strong practical. "We can go back to the house after this," he said. Back to the house. The farmhouse on Old Quarry Road. The kitchen where Grant had leaned against the counter with a mug of coffee, telling me the weather like it was a private joke between us. The mudroom where his boots still sat scuffed at the toes. The living room where his blanket was folded on the arm of the chair, waiting for a man who would never sit there again. I wanted to say, I do not know how to go back. I wanted to say I do not know who I am in that house without him. Instead, I nodded again because nodding was the only movement my body seemed capable of. When we got to the farm, the sky had turned the color of slate. The orchard stretched behind the barn, rows of bare branches reaching up like hands. Grant and I had built this place slowly, not with money we did not have, but with years, with scraped knuckles, early mornings, late nights, and the kind of partnership that made hard work feel like belonging. The kitchen was warm, smelling faintly of dish soap and the cinnamon rolls the neighbors had brought. There were stacks of foil pans on the counter, handwritten labels in familiar looping script. Someone had left a sympathy card propped against the salt shaker. I stared at it like it was written in a language I used to know. Ethan took off his coat and hung it neatly. Paige moved through the room, straightening a chair, wiping a spot from the table that did not need wiping. I poured myself a glass of water and watched my hand shake just enough to ripple the surface. "We should talk tonight," Ethan said. "Just us." Paige nodded quickly. She set her phone face down on the table, a small gesture that said, "I am present," even though her eyes kept flicking toward it like she was expecting it to buzz. I felt a prick of unease. Not fear exactly, more like the sensation you get when the air shifts before a storm. "About what I asked, about next steps," Ethan said. "About you. About the farm." His choice of words landed wrong. Next steps. Like Grant's death was a project timeline. I sat at the table because my legs suddenly did not trust themselves. Paige sat beside me, close enough that anyone looking would think she was being supportive. Ethan stayed standing for a second, hands on the back of a chair as if he needed leverage. "Mom," he began, "we have to be realistic." I looked at him, really looked, searching for grief behind his calm. I saw fatigue, yes, determination, a kind of urgency, but not grief. "You cannot stay here alone," he said. "This place is too much. The maintenance, the property, the equipment, the winters. It is not safe." "It is my home," I said, and my voice came out thinner than I intended. Paige reached for my hand. Her fingers were warm, her grip light. "Mom," she said gently, "there are places that can help. Nice places. People your age, activities, medical staff if you need it. You would not have to worry about everything." I stared at their faces and felt a strange disconnect, like I was watching actors perform a scene I did not remember writing. "I am 66, I said. "I am not 90. Ethan exhaled slowly, like a man trying to be patient. "It is not about age. It is about capacity. Dad handled a lot more than you think." That stung sharp and immediate. Grant and I had handled everything together. We had built capacity the way you build a life, one decision at a time. To hear my own son reduce me to a passenger in my marriage made heat rise in my throat. "I handled plenty," I said. Paige squeezed my hand once, a little warning disguised as comfort. "We know you did," she said, "but things change. After a loss like this, you deserve support." Support. Another soft word. Another blanket over something hard. Ethan pulled a manila folder from his bag and placed it on the table. The sound was small, but it made my stomach drop. "Dad took care of some paperwork," he said, "before the end." He wanted everything clear so there would not be confusion later. I did not touch the folder. The edges looked too crisp for a house that had just buried its heart. "What paperwork?" I asked. "His will," Ethan said. "Also some financial stuff. It is straightforward." Paige nodded again, eyes on my face, measuring my reaction. I could almost see her rehearsed concern, the way she kept her voice low and smooth. "Grant and I talked about a will years ago," I said. "Our lawyer, Mr. Henley, in Rutland. We updated things after Paige got married, after Ethan moved to Boston." "I know what it says." Ethan hesitated. "Just a fraction." Then he smoothed it over with a calm smile that did not reach his eyes. "This is the most current version," he said. "Dad wanted it this way." The room felt suddenly smaller. The kitchen clock ticked above the stove. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, wind pushed against the windows. I looked from Ethan to Paige. Their bodies angled slightly toward each other, a subtle alignment. They were not sitting with me. They were sitting opposite me, even with Paige close enough to hold my hand. I did not open the folder. I could not yet. I was too tired, too raw, too filled with the kind of grief that makes ordinary decisions feel impossible. "I just lost my husband," I said quietly. "Can we not do this tonight?" Ethan softened his tone the way you do with someone you need to move without startling. "Of course," he said. "We are not trying to overwhelm you. We just want to make sure you are taken care of." Taken care of. Again. Paige leaned in and kissed my temple. "We love you, Mom," she whispered. I nodded because nodding was still the only thing I could do without falling apart. I let her hold my hand while my mind tried to catch up to the way the day had shifted. It had started with a funeral. It was ending with a folder on my kitchen table and my children speaking about my life as if it were already being reassigned. That night after they went upstairs to the guest rooms, I stayed at the table with the manila folder untouched in front of me. The house creaked the way it always did when the temperature dropped. Grant's chair sat empty by the window. The orchard outside was dark, the branches black against the snow. I told myself Ethan and Paige were just trying to help. I told myself they were doing what grown children do when they panic. I told myself I was seeing betrayal because grief makes everything feel sharp. Then I realized neither of them had asked me what I wanted not once, and the thought settled in my chest like a stone. Chapter 2. In the morning light, the stone in my chest did not dissolve. It only got heavier as the house woke up around it. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Grant's hands the last week, how they looked smaller inside mine, how he still tried to squeeze my fingers like it meant something. When the sun finally pushed through the kitchen curtains, I was already at the table with a mug of coffee that had gone cold. The manila folder sat where Ethan had left it, perfectly square to the edge of the table like a boundary line. Ethan came downstairs first, dressed as if he had an early flight. He did not have an early flight. He had just trained himself to look ready to leave even in his childhood home. "Morning, Mom," he said quietly. I nodded. My voice felt trapped behind my teeth. Paige followed a few minutes later, hair-brushed skin glowing in a way that made me wonder if she had a travel-size ring light in her suitcase. She kissed my cheek again, same place, same pressure. "How are you holding up?" she asked. Holding up was what people said when they did not want to ask what was actually happening inside you. I stared at the sink for a moment, watching a single drop of water cling to the faucet. "I am here," I said. Paige pulled out her phone, then caught herself and set it down. She smiled like she was trying to make the room warmer. Ethan opened the refrigerator, took out milk, and checked the expiration date. That small, normal act made something in me ache. Grant used to do that too, not because he cared about dates, but because he liked being useful. Ethan poured cereal into a bowl and spoke without looking up. "I called Carter Glen this morning. They can get us in for a tour on Thursday." Carter Glen was the assisted living place Paige had mentioned the night before. I had never heard of it until yesterday, and now it had a time slot and a plan wrapped around it like a ribbon. "You called them," I said. Ethan set the milk down carefully. "Yes, it is just a visit, no commitment." Paige leaned forward, hands clasped. "It is a really nice place," she said. "Not like the ones you were picturing. There are gardens, a library, a little cafe, and they have on-site medical staff just in case." Just in case. The phrase landed like a warning. "I did not ask you to do that," I said. Ethan finally looked at me. His eyes were calm, almost too calm. "Mom, we are trying to help. You do not need to worry about all the details right now." I let out a slow breath. The word worry sounded so gentle. It always did right before someone took something from you. "I can decide what I need," I said. Paige reached across the table and touched my hand again. Her nails were pale pink glossy. "We know," she said softly. "But you are grieving. You have been carrying so much. Let us carry some of it for you. Carry it." I watched her fingers on my skin and tried to remember the last time she had helped me carry anything heavy. It had been years ago when she was a teenager and still lived here before she discovered that city life made better pictures. Ethan slid the manila folder closer, not pushing it at me, just placing it within reach like a compromise. "We should go over a few things," he said, "so you are not blindsided later. The pastor used that word blindsided when he talked about tragedy. Ethan used it like he was talking about taxes. I did not open the folder, but I could feel it pulling my attention like gravity. "Where is Mr. Henley?" I asked. "Our lawyer. Why did he not call me about any of this?" Ethan blinked once. "Dad did not want to bother you." That was not an answer. It was a cushion. Paige spoke quickly as if she could smooth the question away. "Maybe Dad used someone else for the final update," she said. "People do that sometimes. It is not unusual." I looked at her, and for a second I saw it. Not cruelty. Calculation. She was choosing the easiest explanation because it kept the conversation moving in the direction she wanted. After breakfast, Ethan disappeared into the living room with his laptop, the screen glow reflecting in the window. Paige went upstairs and made a call in the hallway, her voice pitched low but sharp, the way it gets when someone is trying to sound pleasant while asking for something. I walked through the house, touching things like I was checking whether they were still real. Grant's coat on the hook by the door, his reading glasses on the end table, the stack of seed catalogs he never got to look through this year. I stopped at the mudroom and stared at his boots, and the grief hit so suddenly my knees went weak. I did not cry. I could not. It felt like crying would open a door I would never be able to close again. When I returned to the kitchen, the manila folder was gone. My stomach dropped. I turned slowly, scanning the counters, the table, the chair where I had left it. "Ethan," I called. He appeared in the doorway, phone in his hand. "Yes." "Where is the folder?" I asked. He hesitated just long enough to tell me he had thought about his answer. "I put it somewhere safe," he said. I did not want it sitting out. Safe from what I said. From me. Paige came in behind him, eyebrows raised, ready to play mediator. "Mom, do not get upset," she said. "It is just paperwork." Just paperwork was becoming their favorite phrase. It made me feel like a child, like I could not be trusted not to rip something important. That afternoon, I went to the small office off the kitchen, the one Grant and I used for farm records. The desk was cluttered with receipts, invoices, a notebook where I had written down irrigation schedules. I opened the filing cabinet, looking for the folder of legal documents we kept in the back. It was there, but it looked disturbed, like someone had been inside it recently. The folders were slightly misaligned. A few papers were turned the wrong way. When I held one of the documents up to the light, my hands started to shake. It was not that I saw something clearly wrong. It was that I saw evidence of handling, of someone else touching the parts of my life that had always been between Grant and me. I heard footsteps behind me. Paige stood in the doorway, arms folded. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice careful. "Looking for our documents," I said. She stepped into the room. "We already have copies," she said. "Ethan is organizing everything, so you do not have to." Copies. The word made my throat tighten. Copies of what, Paige? She glanced away, and that was the moment the suspicion became something solid. Not proof, but weight. Ethan came to the doorway too, like they moved as a unit when they sensed resistance. "Mom," he said, "we need to get some information to Carter Glenn. Basic things, emergency contacts, medical history. It is standard." "You already gave them my medical history," I said. He held up his hand slightly. "We asked your doctor for records. We signed the release forms. You are listed as the patient, but as your family, we can help coordinate." He said it as if it was a kindness, but I heard the real message underneath. "We can do this without you." I stood up straighter. "I am still capable of signing my own forms." Paige sighed softly, the way she always used to when she thought I was being stubborn. "Mom, nobody is saying you are not capable. We are saying you do not need to be alone in it." Her phone buzzed on the desk. She glanced at the screen and her face changed for a second, tension flashing through the gloss. She turned it over quickly. "Everything okay?" I asked. She forced a smile. "Just work, a brand partner. They are picky about timelines. Work." Paige rarely called her online life work, not in front of me. The way she said it now sounded like a defense. Ethan looked down at his own phone thumb moving fast. I caught a glimpse of a banking app before he tilted the screen away. His jaw clenched, then relaxed. "What is going on?" I asked, and my voice was quieter than I expected. Ethan looked at me for a long moment. Something flickered in his eyes, not guilt exactly, but pressure, like the walls were closing in and he needed this to happen to breathe again. "We are trying to stabilize things," he said. Stabilize. Another corporate word. That evening they sat me down again, this time in the living room. The lamps were on, casting warm light over the furniture Grant and I had picked together. Ethan sat across from me, posture straight. Paige sat beside him, closer to him than to me. "Thursday," Ethan said. 10 in the morning. Carter Glen. We will drive together." I opened my mouth to argue, to demand time, to demand respect, but the exhaustion of the last week pressed down on me. Grief does that. It makes every fight feel too expensive. Paige reached for my hand again. "Just come see it," she said. "For me. If you hate it, we will talk about other options, but please do not shut down before you know." I looked at her and tried to find my daughter in that face, the girl who used to come home smelling like sun and apples, cheeks flushed from running through the rows. I saw a woman who needed something, who was scared of something, and who had decided I was the simplest way to fix it. I said yes, and the word tasted like surrender. That night, lying in my bed, I listened to the house settle around me. Ethan and Paige were upstairs, doors closed. Their voices drifted down, once low and urgent, then stopped. I stared at the ceiling and told myself I had agreed to a tour, nothing more. I told myself I was buying time. I told myself that was what capable women did. They observed first, they reacted second. But in the dark, with Grant's absence filling every corner, I could not ignore the truth that had been forming since the moment that folder hit my kitchen table. They were not waiting for me to decide. They were moving forward, and I was being carried along. Chapter 3. Thursday came faster than I wanted, and by the time the sun spilled across the kitchen floor, I felt like I was stepping into something that had already been decided. Ethan was up early, showered, shaved, moving through the house with the same quiet urgency he used when he was catching a train back to the city. Paige wore a cream sweater under her coat, soft and expensive, like she was going to brunch, not to tour an assisted living facility. She kept smiling at me, the kind of smile that asks you to cooperate. I put on my brown wool coat and slipped my feet into boots that still had a bit of orchard mud dried into the seams. I grabbed my purse from the hook by the door. I always carried the same purse, heavy with habit. My wallet, my keys, a small pill case, a few folded tissues, and tucked in the inner pocket where the zipper always snagged were papers I had never needed to explain to anyone. Paige noticed the purse and nodded approvingly, like I had remembered an important item. "You got everything you need, Mom." "I always do," I said. Ethan held the door for me, and the cold air hit my face, clean and sharp. The driveway was edged with snow, but the road looked clear. A couple of trucks passed on old quarry road tires humming on pavement. Life went on even when yours had stopped. In the car, Ethan drove. Paige sat in the passenger seat. I sat in back like a kid being taken somewhere she did not choose. The heater blew warm air that smelled faintly of pine from the little tree air freshener Ethan must have bought at a gas station on his way in. I watched the familiar landmarks slip by. The post office with the faded mural, the diner with the neon sign that flickered on cold mornings, the hardware store where Grant used to buy nails by the pound. Paige turned halfway toward me. "It really is nice, Mom. You might even like it." "I am not looking for a place to like," I said. Ethan kept his eyes on the road. "We are just looking, that is all." I studied the back of his headrest, the set of his shoulders. I waited for him to say something that sounded like my son, something human. Instead, he drove like he was following a route he had memorized. We passed the turn that would have taken us toward Carter Glen. I knew that turn. 2 miles past the old apple packing shed left at the white fence, then the road curves by the river. Ethan did not slow down. I leaned forward slightly. "Ethan, that was the turn." He did not glance in the mirror. "I know." Paige reached for the radio, then stopped like she could not decide whether music would help or make things worse. "Traffic gets weird over there," she said. "He found a better way." "It is 10 in the morning," I said. "What traffic?" Ethan tightened his grip on the wheel. "Mom, please." That word please used like a leash. I sat back, my heart beating harder now, not from fear exactly, but from recognition. This was not about a tour. It was about motion, keeping me moving so I could not plant my feet. The roads became narrower. The storefronts thinned out. Houses sat farther apart, mailboxes leaning at odd angles. We crossed a set of railroad tracks, and the car bounced lightly. I saw a small sign for Miller Creek Gas ahead, the kind of place with 2 pumps and a faded advertisement for coffee in the window. Ethan signaled and turned onto a side road before we reached it. Gravel crackled under the tires. The trees grew closer, bare branches forming a tunnel of gray. "Where are we going?" I asked, and my voice stayed steady even though my hands were starting to sweat inside my gloves. Paige twisted in her seat. "Mom, do not do this." "Do what?" "Make it harder," she said, and her eyes flashed with something I had not seen from her since she was a teenager, frustration that had nowhere to go. Ethan slowed and pulled onto the shoulder near an empty field. The sky was bright, the sun high enough to cast clean shadows. A few cars passed on the main road behind us. We were not in the middle of nowhere. We were close enough to civilization that what came next could be defended as reasonable. He put the car in park and exhaled like he had been holding his breath for miles. Paige stared straight ahead, lips pressed together. I waited. Ethan turned around in his seat to face me. His expression was calm, controlled, almost gentle, and that was what scared me most. "Mom," he said, "this is where we need to be honest." My stomach dropped, but my voice stayed level. "Honest about what?" "About the fact that you cannot stay on that property," he said. "Not alone, not like this." Paige finally spoke, her voice quiet. "We have been trying to do this kindly." I looked from one to the other. The sunlight made their faces look younger, smoother, like they had not spent nights listening to a man breathe his last in a hospital bed. "What are you saying?" I asked. Ethan opened the trunk release. The click sounded too loud in the small space. "We packed a few things," he said. "Basics, clothes, your toiletries, your medication." "My medication is in my purse," I said automatically, and I tightened my fingers around the strap. Paige turned fully toward me now. Her eyes were glossy, but no tears fell. "We did not want you to have to think about it," she said. "You are overwhelmed." "No," I said. "I am grieving. That is not the same thing." Ethan got out of the car. Gravel crunched under his shoes. Paige followed him a second later, smoothing her coat like she was about to walk into a meeting. I stayed seated for a beat, watching them through the window, trying to understand how 2 people I raised had become this. Ethan opened my door. Cold air rushed in. "Come on," he said. "We will get you settled somewhere safe." "Somewhere?" I repeated. Paige lifted the small suitcase from the trunk and set it on the ground. It was navy clean, new-looking. Not mine. Something they had bought quickly, as if my life could be packed at a department store. "Where is Carter Glen?" I asked. Ethan did not flinch. "You are not going to Carter Glen today." Paige swallowed. Her voice dropped lower. "We thought it would be better if you had some space first." "Space," I said, and I almost laughed because the word was so clean for something so ugly. Ethan glanced toward the main road, then back at me. "There is a motel in town," he said. "And there is a gas station right there. You can call a cab or we can arrange something. But you cannot go back to the farm." I stepped out of the car slowly. My boots sank slightly into soft gravel. I stood upright even though my knees wanted to fold. Paige held the suitcase handle out to me like an offering. "Please do not make a scene," she said. "Not out here." "I am the one being left on the side of the road," I said, "and you are worried about a scene." Ethan lifted his hands, palms out like he was calming a client. "Mom, listen. The paperwork is in motion. It is better for everyone if we do this cleanly. Dad wanted it handled. He wanted it clear." There it was again Dad wanted. A shield made of a dead man. I took a slow breath, in and out the way the nurse taught me. My chest hurt, but my mind started to sharpen. If they had done this, it meant the conversation was over. It meant they believed they had the power to move me like furniture. Paige looked at me with a pleading expression that did not reach her mouth. "We are not trying to hurt you," she said. "We are trying to protect you." "From what?" I asked. "From my own life." Neither of them answered. A car passed on the main road, a blue sedan driver glancing over for half a second, then looking away. The world kept its eyes forward. I reached down and took the suitcase handle. It was heavier than it looked, not because of what was inside, but because of what it meant. My children had packed a version of my life they could tolerate. Ethan stepped back toward the driver's seat. "You will be okay," he said. "Call me when you are settled." Paige hesitated, then leaned in as if she might hug me. She stopped short, like touching me might make this real. "We will talk soon," she said. I did not beg. I did not scream. I did not collapse. I stood there with my purse on my shoulder and my suitcase at my side, watching them climb back into the car. Ethan started the engine. Paige looked back at me once through the rear window, her face already smoothing into something composed. The car pulled away, tires spitting gravel, and for a moment I was surrounded by dust and silence. When the dust settled, I was still standing. My hands trembled, but my feet stayed planted. I could feel the cold through the soles of my boots, and I could feel the weight of my purse, the zipper digging slightly into my palm. The papers inside were not just paper. They were proof. They were a line I had drawn years ago without knowing I would ever need it. I turned toward the main road and started walking. Each step hurt. Not my feet, not yet, but the place inside me that had believed motherhood was a lifelong safety net. The sky was still bright. Cars still passed. Somewhere behind me, my farmhouse sat on its hill, my husband's chair still empty by the window, my orchard waiting for hands that had tended it for decades. I walked anyway alone, and the loneliness was real, but it did not crush me. It made room for something else, something steady. It made room for me. Chapter 4. By the time I reached Miller Creek Gas, my legs felt like they belonged to someone else, but my mind was clearer than it had been in days. The little station sat just off the main road, 2 pumps a bell above the door that chimed when you walked in. The kind of place where the coffee is always too strong, and the clerk remembers what you drove 10 years ago. A pickup idled near the air hose. The sun was still bright, the sky unbothered. I pulled the door open and the warmth hit my face. The clerk behind the counter looked up, then froze. "Ma'am, are you all right?" My voice came out steady, even though my throat burned. "I need to use your phone for a minute, mine is dead." He glanced at the suitcase, the dirt on my boots, the way my hands kept tightening around my purse strap. He did not ask questions. He slid the store phone toward me. "Go ahead." I dialed from memory the numbers of the one person Grant and I had called when something mattered, when a handshake was not enough. My fingers shook as the line rang. A familiar voice answered on the second ring. "Law Office of Samuel Crowley." I swallowed. "This is Marin Whitlock. I need Sam." There was a pause. Then the tone shifted. "Hold on, Ms. Whitlock." A click. A breath. Another click. "Marin." Hearing his voice did something to me. Not relief exactly, but grounding like a hand on my shoulder. "Sam," I said, and I hated how small my voice sounded for a second. "I need help, right now." "Where are you?" "Miller Creek Gas, on Route 9. I was just left on the side of the road by my son." There was a silence that lasted half a heartbeat, the kind of silence that means the man listening is choosing his words carefully. "Are you hurt?" "No. I am cold, and I am angry, and I am not going back to that house until I know what is happening." "Good," he said, firm. "Do not go back alone. Stay where you are. I can meet you in 20 minutes. "I do not have a ride." "I will take care of it. Marin, listen to me. You did the right thing calling." The clerk had been pretending not to listen, but his eyes kept flicking toward me. I slid the phone back and took a shaky breath. "Thank you," I said to the clerk. He nodded once. "Coffee." "Later." I said, almost smiling because later was suddenly something I could imagine. When Sam pulled up, he parked crooked like he had not cared how it looked. He got out of his car quickly, tall and broad-shouldered gray at his temples, coat unbuttoned. He walked straight to me, not trying to soften anything with small talk. "Marin," he said, and his voice was the same one I remembered from years ago, calm but sharp when it needed to be. "Get in the car." I carried my suitcase out and the clerk held the door for me. Sam gave him a nod that looked like gratitude and warning at the same time. Inside the car, the heater blasted. I did not realize how cold I was until the warmth started to sting my hands. Sam glanced at my purse. "You have your wallet." "Yes." "Good. Now tell me everything from the beginning, and do not leave anything out just because it feels ugly." So I told him. The funeral, the folder, the tour, the wrong turn, the gravel shoulder, the suitcase, the way Ethan spoke like he was closing a deal, the way Paige could not look me in the eye at the end. Sam kept his eyes on the road, but his jaw tightened once when I told him Ethan said the paperwork was in motion. "What paperwork?" he asked. "He said a will, a newer will. He said Grant wanted it this way." Sam exhaled slowly. "Grant did not do anything without telling you," he said. "He did," I admitted. "Sometimes he went quiet when he thought he was protecting me." Sam nodded, but he did not agree. "Protection is not secrecy, Marin. Not in your marriage." He drove me straight to his office in Rutland, a small brick building on a corner with a brass plaque by the door. Inside, the air smelled like paper and old wood. A receptionist looked up, startled, then stood. "Mr. Crowley?" "Clear my 10 o'clock, Sam said. Then he looked at me. "And bring her water." He led me down the hall into his office. It was the same room where Grant and I had sat years ago signing documents, laughing nervously at how serious everything sounded. The same window looking out onto Main Street. The same shelf of binders. Sam closed the door, then sat across from me, hands folded. "All right," he said. "Do you have a copy of the will Ethan showed you?" "No." He took the folder away. He said he put it somewhere safe. Sam nodded as if he expected that. "I can request it," he said. "If he tries to file anything with the county, we will see it. But there is something else I need to know. What exactly do you own in your name right now?" I tightened my grip on my purse strap. "I own the farm with Grant," I said. "Or I thought I did." "You own the farm jointly," Sam corrected gently. "But I am asking about anything separate, anything that was not titled in both your names." I hesitated. Grant knew. I knew. We never talked about it with the kids because there was never a reason to, and because the one time I tried, Ethan had laughed and said, "Mom, please," like I was being dramatic. Sam watched me patient. "I have land," I said finally. "Not the whole farm. A section." His eyebrows lifted slightly. "How much?" 18 acres. "Where?" "East side past the creek. The wooded stretch and the spring." Sam leaned back a fraction, and I saw something like recognition in his face. "That is in your name only." "Yes," I said. "I bought it before I married Grant. I kept it that way." Sam nodded slowly. "And the spring feeds the irrigation line," he said, more statement than question. "It does," I said. "It is the only reliable source we have without drilling deeper, and the only one with the old recorded right tied to that parcel." Sam went still for a second, then leaned forward again, voice lower. "Marin, do you understand what that means?" I looked down at my purse, at the zipper that always snagged at the inner pocket. "It means they cannot run the farm without it," I said. "It means they cannot sell the farm without it," Sam corrected. "Not cleanly, not to anyone with lawyers. Because any buyer who does due diligence will ask about water access easements, rights of way, and zoning restrictions. And if your son is trying to push a development deal, the first thing a developer cares about is water and permitting." My pulse sped up, but my face stayed calm. Calm was the only thing I had left that belonged to me. "They said they were selling," I said quietly. Ethan kept saying the farm is too much, but he was not talking about me, was he? Sam did not answer right away. He opened a drawer and pulled out a file, flipping through papers with practiced speed. "I have copies of your older estate documents," he said. "The ones you and Grant signed in 2014, then updated in 2019. Those are the last ones I prepared. If Ethan has something newer, then either Grant went to someone else or Ethan is bluffing or something worse." I held my breath. "Something worse?" I repeated. Sam met my eyes. "Forgery happens," he said, "more often than people like to admit, especially when money is involved and someone thinks a grieving spouse will not fight." The word forgery should have shocked me. Instead, it slid into place like a missing piece. "He did not look sad," I said, and my voice cracked on the last word. "He looked busy." Sam nodded once. "Now," he said, and his tone shifted into action. "We are going to protect you. First, I am filing an emergency motion to stop any transfer of the property while we sort out the validity of whatever document he is waving around. That is called an injunction. It buys us time and it puts everyone on notice." "Can he stop it?" I asked. "He can try," Sam said. "But judges do not like surprises and they like fraudulent transfers even less. Also, you owning that 18-acre parcel gives you leverage. If your water rights are tied to it, then any buyer has a problem." He paused. "Do you have proof that parcel is yours?" he asked. I unzipped my purse. The zipper snagged like it always did, then gave way. I reached into the inner pocket and pulled out a folded document in a worn envelope. "I have the deed," I said. Sam took it carefully like he was holding something alive. He glanced over it, then nodded satisfied. "Good," he said. "Very good." My phone buzzed in my coat pocket, a weak vibration like a small animal. I looked at the screen. A string of missed calls. Ethan, Paige, then a text from Ethan. "Mom, where are you? We need to talk. This is getting complicated." Another text followed immediately. "Please do not do anything rash. We can fix this." I stared at the words. Fix this. Not, are you safe? Not, I am sorry. Fix this like I was a problem in a system. Sam watched my face. "They are contacting you," he said. "Yes," I said. "They are panicking." He nodded. "Do not respond," he said. "Not yet." I set the phone down on the desk, face up, and let the screen go dark. Sam stood and walked to the door. "I am going to make some calls," he said. "To the county recorder, to a title company, and if I have to the developer. If there is a deal in motion, I want them to hear from me before they hear another word from your son." He paused with his hand on the knob. "Marin," he said softer. "You are not alone in this. Not anymore." When he left the room, the office went quiet, except for the faint sound of printers and distant voices in the hallway. I sat back in the chair and finally felt my shoulders drop. My hands still trembled, but it was not fear. It was the release of having done something that mattered. Outside the window, people walked past with coffee cups and shopping bags, ordinary lives moving in ordinary time. Inside on Sam's desk, my deed lay open under the lamp, plain and undeniable. For the first time since Grant's funeral, I felt something close to safety settle into my bones. Whatever Ethan and Paige thought they were controlling it was no longer just my life. It was paper trails and recorded rights and judges who did not care about family stories. It was bigger than them now. Chapter 5. I did not feel triumphant in the days that followed. I felt quiet like a room after everyone has left, and you can finally hear your own breathing again. Sam moved fast. Faster than I would have believed anyone could move in a small town where people like to talk before they act. He filed paperwork that same afternoon. He called the county recorder. He contacted a title company. He sent a formal notice to a development firm called Briar Ridge Communities, the name Ethan had tried not to say out loud, but that still showed up in the trail of calls and emails Sam uncovered. When Sam told me the deal was already being discussed, not just imagined, I sat in his office and stared at the wall behind his desk at a framed photo of his kids on a fishing trip, and I thought about how long my children had been planning to remove me. I wanted to ask Sam if it was normal to feel two kinds of grief at once: grief for the husband you loved and grief for the children you thought you had. Instead, I asked the practical question: what happens now? Sam answered the way he always did, with facts that made emotions easier to survive. Now they cannot transfer or sell anything until the court hears us, and any developer with a brain will step back when they see an injunction and a disputed will. He was right. Within a week, Sam told me Briar Ridge Communities had suspended discussions. They did not want a lawsuit. They did not want bad press. They definitely did not want a project that might not have water access tied up in court. Ethan called me the first night after Sam filed. I watched his name fill my screen and I let it ring until the voicemail clicked on. Paige texted, then texted again. "Mom, please answer. We can talk about this. You are making it worse." When I finally responded, it was not to argue. It was to set a boundary. I am safe. I am with my attorney. I will speak through him. The message felt cold, but it was the only language they seemed to respect. The next day, Ethan showed up at Sam's office unannounced. I did not see him come in. I heard his voice in the hallway, low and controlled, with an edge of panic he could not hide. "I am her son," he said. "I have a right to speak to her." Sam answered him calmly. "You have a right to hire your own counsel. You do not have a right to intimidate her." When Sam came back into my room, his face was unreadable. "He is worried," Sam said. "About me?" I asked. "About the money," Sam said. "About his reputation. About the fact that if he filed something fraudulent, he is exposed." That word "exposed" landed differently than revenge. It did not sound like vengeance. It sounded like consequence. Paige called later that evening, and for the first time, her voice sounded like it might crack. "Mom," she said, "just talk to me. Please." I closed my eyes. I pictured her as a little girl on the porch steps, knees scraped, crying because she had fallen off her bike. The instinct to comfort her rose up in me, automatic and deep. Then I remembered her face on the side of the road, the way she held the suitcase out like a prop. I asked her one question: "Are you calling because you miss me or because you are scared?" There was a pause, a long one. "I cannot lose everything," she whispered. "Not I am sorry. Not I love you. Not I was wrong. Just fear for herself." I ended the call without yelling, without lecturing, without begging her to be better than she was. I ended it because my grief could not carry their selfishness too. Over the next month, the story unwound the way legal stories do. Not with fireworks, but with paper deadlines, and people suddenly realizing that families do not override the law. Sam confirmed that the will Ethan had shown me was not the last version Sam had on file. When Ethan tried to submit it, questions surfaced fast. The signature did not match other documents from the same period. The witness names raised eyebrows. There were inconsistencies no one would notice in a kitchen conversation, but that a clerk, a judge, and a competent attorney would see immediately. Ethan hired a lawyer from the city. That lawyer reached out to Sam to negotiate. I did not attend those meetings. I did not sit across from Ethan and Paige in a room full of polite words. I let the system do what it was built to do, which is separate truth from pressure. And while all of that was happening, another kind of consequence rolled through their lives. Ethan worked in finance, the kind of job where people talk about ethics but care about risk. Once a rumor started that he was involved in a questionable transfer of property, doors began to close quietly. Not with a dramatic firing, but with subtle shifts. Meetings he used to lead were reassigned. A client he had bragged about stopped returning his calls. An older colleague who used to clap him on the shoulder began to keep his distance. Paige, for her part, lived online. Her image was her currency. When she stopped posting for a week because she was stressed, her engagement dropped. Brand partners moved on. People are loyal to a face until that face looks unstable. She tried to pretend everything was fine, posting filtered photos and cheerful captions. But comments started to appear under her posts, questions she could not control. Is everything okay with your family? Heard your dad passed, sorry. Why are you in town? She turned off comments for a while. That alone told me how scared she was. No one destroyed them. No one had to. They had built their lives on the idea that they could manage people the way they managed appearances. The moment the system refused to be managed, their foundations cracked. At some point, Sam asked me what I wanted, not legally, but personally. Do you want to go back to the farmhouse? He asked. The question surprised me. I had assumed going back was the goal, taking my place back, proving I still belonged there. But when I pictured the house, I did not see comfort. I saw the kitchen table with the folder. I saw my children sitting angled toward each other. I saw the way the air had changed, like my home was no longer mine. I want my life back, I said, not my old life, my life. So I made choices that would have terrified the version of me from a year ago. I rented a small apartment above a bookstore on Main Street in Rutland. It was not fancy. It had creaky floors and a view of the brick buildings across the road. But it was mine. My name on the lease. My key in my pocket. The first night I slept there, I woke up once disoriented, reaching for Grant out of habit. My hand found cold sheets. I lay still for a long time, letting the ache move through me like weather. In the mornings, I walked to the coffee shop, and the barista began to remember my order. People looked me in the eye. They asked how I was, and when I said I missed him, they did not rush me to a brighter feeling. They just nodded like missing someone is allowed. The farm did not vanish. It did not get bulldozed into a development with matching mailboxes and a decorative pond. Sam helped me set up an arrangement with a local agricultural cooperative. The woman who ran it was Evelyn Mercer, a steady, practical woman in her early 60s who had spent her life keeping small farms alive. When Evelyn visited me, she brought a folder and a jar of honey from her own hives. I do not want to take your land from you, she said. I want to keep it working the way you and Grant always did. I told her what mattered most. The spring, I said. The water. It has to stay protected. Evelyn nodded. We can do that, she said. We can put the water rights into a community trust for agricultural use. It keeps the land alive and it keeps developers out. That word trust meant something different to me now. Not blind faith. A structure. A boundary. So I did it. I kept the 18 acres in my name, and I granted the cooperative rights to use the spring for irrigation under terms that protected it. I turned what my children saw as leverage into something that would outlast all of us. Ethan and Paige never apologized in the way I used to imagine apologies. There was no tearful confession, no sudden transformation into the children I thought I raised. There were a few emails through attorneys, a few short messages that sounded like they had been edited by someone who billed by the hour. I hope you are well. This has been difficult for everyone. We should find a way forward. I read those words and felt something I did not expect. Not anger, not satisfaction, just clarity. Some people love you the way they love an inheritance. They stay close as long as you are useful. Grant used to say that the orchard taught you patience, that you cannot force a tree to give fruit before it is ready. You can only tend it, protect it, and accept what it becomes. I think about him a lot. In the quiet moments when I am folding laundry, when I pass a hardware store, when I smell cut grass. I miss him in a way that has no solution. I carry that missing like a second heart. But I do not regret choosing myself when my children stopped choosing me. If you are listening to this and you have ever felt yourself being slowly pushed out of your own life by family, by work, by people who speak softly while they take your choices away, I want you to hear me. You are not difficult for wanting respect. You are not selfish for protecting what you built. And you are not too late to draw a line. If this story hit somewhere tender for you, tell me in the comments what moment you recognize the most or what you would have done in my place. I read them. I really do. Because for the first time in a long time, my life is mine to listen to.